Let's pick up where we left off and take a look at the different operations we can perform when we're doing a group by. We'll start with the data that we set up in the previous session. I've added one more column called volume, but it could be anything. And the reason that I've added this is I want to show you how these different group by operations operate on the underlying structure, whether they operate on a column by column, series by series basis, or a data frame by data frame basis. And that will give you some guidance in terms of when you have to use which of these structures. Let's start off by looking at groupby.agg. We often find we want to use groupby.agg when the grouping operation we want to perform isn't natively supported on that groupby object. In other words, if I want to group this by the date, and I want to find the min or the max of both columns directly supported by the pandas data frame's groupby object. If I want to do a mean or a standard deviation, already exists, don't have to do anything special. In fact, the most simplistic place where I might want to use an agg is if I want to do two different operations. For example, for the signal, I want to do a max there, and for the volume, I want to do a sum there, or a mean there per group. So maybe that's the first place that I might want to use agg. But I want to show you what agg actually has as a core for its thought process, it's a core for its reason for existence. Groupby.aggregate is about taking each one of the individual groups and performing a function which gives you a compression of that entire group window into a single scalar value. In other words, if I do a group by, and I group by the date, and I do an agg, and in here I put some user-defined function, groupby.agg will operate on a series by series basis, and it will anticipate that I'm trying to turn that series that looks like all of the dates put together for the signal and all of the dates put together for, or all of the values for the particular gate for the signal and all those tickers for that particular date for that volume, compresses that to one scalar value. In other words, what if, for example, I want to compute something like a z-score, and I want to do this on a ticker by ticker basis, and I want to just figure out what the last value for that z-score would be. Well, I might pull in that z-score from my SciPy, and I do a groupby.agg, I'll get my series, I'll do a z-score on the series values, and I'll get the last value. And here you should see this computed on a ticker by ticker basis. You can see my index has been updated. One of the other things you should think about is when you perform a groupby.agg, what is the index going to result in? Like with all of the group bys, the index will represent what or will show you what you grouped over. In this particular case, it'll just be each of the individual ticker values that you had. But at its core, what you should think is agg is all about taking the values and producing a singular scalar value, insofar as pandas considers the result to be a scalar value. Let me show you something that happens fairly often. Let's say there is an additional piece of data here, and the additional piece of data that we have here is maybe some string value. Maybe somebody has decided that they want to store some modality or some classification, and that classification may change over time, and they want to store that next to the numerical data. And as part of their analysis, they want to aggregate over this particular additional string data. And what they want to do is they want to take all of those values and put them together into something like a Python set. Well, you can just as easily say group by the date and give me just this data column and do an agg and dump the result into a set, because pandas will consider that set to be a scalar value. But there are certain things you cannot do. You can put it into a tuple, you can put it into a list. Can you put it into a pandas series? No. And so what you should think is that .agg has to return a single value that pandas will view as a scalar. And in some cases, you may say, well, you know what? Put a series object within this structure. It's just a pi object pointer. How is it any different than a set or a tuple or a list or something like that? you have to provide a scalar value that pandas will assume to be a scalar value. And we'll see this pops up fairly often. There are some cases where you may want to return from these structures a value that you consider to be a scalar, but pandas will say, oh, no, I think you mean this to be some sort of vector. I'm going to perform some behind-the-scenes transformation for you. And you have to be a little bit careful of that. But for the very common use case where you want to say, give me all of the unique values that I saw for this particular string value that I have here, you can just .agg on a set, because the set will take all the values in that series, it'll dump them into a Python set. That Python set will be viewed as a scalar value by pandas, and you'll get a new structure indexed according to the thing you grouped over. That's groupby.agg. You use it when you want the grouping to provide one row for each unique element of the grouping, or you want to reduce to a scalar. When we take a look at all of these operations on groupby, we can think of them in terms of the relationship between the input rows and the output rows. Agg is about reducing the input rows, reducing the group to a single row.